Good afternoon and welcome to Refresh, or shall I say welcome back to Refresh. I'm so glad that so many of you keep coming back and being part of this wonderful community. It's our time to connect, be inspired, learn something, and ultimately feel a bit better for this time spent together. And we all know that this truly is what Generation W is all about, and this truly is what I think so many of us need. I have to tell you, it's really hard to believe that we've done 40 shows, and this is our third of this year. As you know, until we get to Gen W, we're doing one every other week. This is our third show for this season 2. I know, I feel like I'm on Netflix. You know how you always go for the episodes, season 1, episode 3. Well, we're in season 2, episode 3. It's very, very exciting. And we started the show as a way to connect with our Generation W friends, family, and followers, and obviously add and grow our community of friends and followers. And we needed a boost back in the spring when we launched. And you know what? We still need that boost. And who did we turn to for show number 1? You know what I mean?
Me.
It's not a quick question here, right? In this welcomed retreat for our schedules every week, none other than Dr. Heidi Hanna. She's a neuroscientist extraordinaire. She has graced our stage at Generation W many times, and we have a great clip that we'll talk about during this time together. And every time she does, she brings us this incredible, actionable knowledge to make our lives more livable. And now, well, she's back. But, we've just talked about refresh. We've talked about this being a retreat. And Sherry, our producer, decided that she thought that looking at re's, 2 letters before words that bring us to the forefront of change would, I don't know, give us something to kind of think about and give us some power. So we have refresh, and we have renew, we have restore, we have reinvent. Everybody in the chat, if you want to add your own, recreate, reiterate, revitalize, and recharge. And today, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be recharging our brain. I will tell you, Heidi, that on Monday, I could not come up with words. So this idea of recharging brain, although it makes me think of the Tesla and plugging it in, if that's what it is, it's great. As I said, you were joined in our very first show by Michelle Ganeless, our president of Comedy Central, and you have always said yes to being a repeat guest. How about that? Another repeat. Not only because she's become such a dear friend and a popular guest at Generation W, but because we all need to find strength. And I have to tell you, in the last couple of days and weeks, here's how my conversations go. Literally this morning, my friend Michael calls. Don, how you doing? I'm doing great. What's going on? Not too much. How are you doing? He goes, I am so over this COVID thing.
Yeah.
That was like the 4th time that same expression has come up. We are all over this COVID thing. Hey, I don't know that I'm feeling right. And you know what? Owning that, I think, is probably a first step for us to dealing with that. And so Dr. Hanna is the Chief Energy Officer of Synergy Brain Fitness, a company providing brain-based health and performance programs to individuals and organizations, a founding partner of the Academy for Brain Health and Performance, and a fellow and advisory board member for the American Institute of Stress. We call her our own personal stress buster. And I am announcing right now, as all of you put on your calendar, April 16th, when Generation W returns. It will be once again virtual this year. It is called Intentional. Oh my goodness. And Heidi will be delivering one of the great workshops that we deliver on Thursday evening. So Heidi, love being with you. As you know, we're all here because we actually could use a little stress busting or de-stressing. How about that?
Well, I would love to say that I can help you get rid of stress, but it turns out that we need a little bit. We have a lot. We got a little too much. It's taking too long. It's a little too intense. We can think about that kind of like physical exercise. There is such a thing as too much, but I'm not going to get rid of it. So I love stress busters as an idea, but it's more like stressed out busters because we want to be stressed. We just want to have just the right amount.
Okay, great. I you know what? If I said today, come get the right amount of stress, that might have worked. Everybody might have said, okay, great. But everybody's right amount of stress right now feels like it's de-stressing.
It is.
I
It
know
is.
you've had your own personal kind of issues with stress of late, which makes you that even more impactful. So, first of all, just if you wouldn't mind, give us a little, because we can have this conversation. When you get on stage, you can't say, oh, can you stop now and tell us about your life? But tell us a little bit about how you come to this work.
Oh my goodness. So when I was about 10, I started having a lot of physical symptoms that were unexplainable. So I had stomach aches and headaches. And then around the age of 12, I actually started fainting and losing consciousness. And I was an athlete. I was a softball pitcher at the time. And I probably was under a little bit of pressure, especially since my dad was my coach. And you know how that goes.
I do.
So a whole nother story. My dad and I get along great now, but we've had our moments. So I was misdiagnosed with a lot of different things from lactose intolerance to epilepsy. And it was very confusing. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the doctors would say, it's probably just stress. And so at 12, for me, stress was being on well, I wasn't dating yet, but I have passed out on a date, on a plane, public speaking, you name it. If I get overstimulated, I'd faint. And I was looking into it and I'd talk to people and they say, well, you think you're going to faint, but you don't really. And I'm like, no, ask my mom, ask the emergency rooms I've been in. So it was really confusing to me. And so I started exploring all of these different things. I ended up studying psychology, nutrition, exercise physiology. And at the time when I was in school, like neuroscience wasn't really a field you get into unless you're going to be a neurosurgeon. So I'm so delighted that now I actually do integrative neuroscience research with some amazing collaborators where I've been able to learn, but through this different lens of like a stress sensitive person who's struggled with depression and anxiety my whole life. And in addition to that, other things that I've started to become more public about, like having an eating disorder for 30 years while I was teaching nutrition. Turns out there's a lot of us doing that. So there's this, to me, this gap between what we know we should be doing and what we're actually doing. And how do we bridge that gap as leaders? How do we make sure that we're really living what we're teaching? And then also, you know, when we are teaching other people, how do we help them? Because so many times we know exactly what we should be doing, but we're not actually doing it. And meditation, Donna, you and I have riffed about this a few times. I'm on like Operation Get Donna to Meditate because we know it works. We know it's the best thing for you, but it turns out there's a lot of different ways to do it. And you've got to find what really works well for you.
All right, well, we're definitely going to come back to that later.
Okay, good. You know, I'm plugging that now so that we have to come.
No, not right now. We'll come back to that. But tell me, what are you seeing out there in the world? Are you hearing what I'm hearing? And what are you seeing professionally as well as personally?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, within the past few months, I've lost at least 2 friends to suicide, which for me is incredibly hard because you know, we always wish we could have done or said something different. I wish I would have known the intensity of some of them. I struggled with suicidal ideation for 9 months last year. So personally, I was going through that, but I look at it through a much different lens because I have this professional research side of understanding, like, why does that happen? I know that those thoughts are not a weakness. I know that those thoughts are not necessarily even clinical or pathological or needed to be medicated or any of that kind of stuff. It's a big picture. I've done my own therapy. I did intensive therapy last year to try to work through all of this and had to make some real game-changing decisions in my life that were hard, but I've come through it and have never been healthier or happier. At the same time, my clients, you know, last year I was super depressed and exhausted and burned out, and my clients were needing me more than ever. So I ended up having to withdraw from school for a while. I'm returning now and I'm very excited. But I wanted to show up for them. So at the time it was doing stress sessions, but it wasn't really stress. It was mental health. We had suicidal people on webinar town halls for major utility companies that I was working with. We had financial services companies that were shutting down their offices and people were grieving the loss of having a home base to go to outside of their home office. And just yesterday, I was on the phone again with another one of my favorite clients who said, and this is in financial services, who said, you know, our advisors are exhausted and they get into this business because they're social creatures and they work hard and they play hard. And now they're just working hard. There is no playing hard. And so we have to do this again. I mean, I did a series of 20 webinars with them internally. I used to work with these companies externally to be kind of a brand ambassador and do workshops, but now we're really working on, you know, how do we change the culture of the organization to recharge regularly, to have healthier boundaries, and to still have that social connection when we're physically separated. So there's a lot of work to be done. People are exhausted. There's something called disaster fatigue that's just natural and normal for us all to go through when it's like, okay, this was kind of interesting for a minute, but the finish line of when this is going to stop keeps getting extended. So it's like running, we don't even know how many marathons in a row and not being able to take a break and really take care of ourselves.
So why don't we just jump into some tips then? Because I think all of us would like to say, okay, how do we recharge our brain and how do we deal with the unknowingness?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways that I kind of teach this. I think the most important thing is to understand a simple framework around how the brain is organized and how we process energy and information. And if you like this kind of stuff, by the way, I will say, please come to our session at Gen W where I can go into a lot more depth on this. But just for our conversation, we process sensory information, the non-conscious part of our brain, much faster than we process more logical, rational thoughts. And so a lot of times it's like we're getting hijacked by our nervous system because we're overstimulated or we're not getting enough sleep, not eating the right foods, not moving often enough, not getting enough natural air, fresh air, natural light. All of those things cue the brain that there's a potential emergency. And so we get stuck in this chronic stress state. And that's the type of stress that really breaks us down and burns us out. That's been associated with 75 to 90% of medical visits, and it will exacerbate anything that's wrong in our system. So it's really important that we get that under wraps. And the organization of the brain is really, it follows what we know in science is kind of the triune brain model, although it's not that extreme. But there's this, it's known as the lizard brain, the primitive part of the brain, and then the monkey brain in the middle, and the human brain on the top. And why I think this model is really helpful is it gives us a visual of why sometimes we feel like we're acting in an animalistic way when we get irritable or aggressive and we're just not the person that we want to be. And by the way, Donna, the number one thing that sets this off for people, I've now given my Stress 360 assessment to over, I think, 80,000 people. The number one factor for people is actually the feeling that there's not enough time to get it all done. And I'd be curious if we
Okay,
were in an audience, how many people can relate to that?
that can't be a revelation. I mean, we all feel that way. There is that. So have you figured out the solution to that? Have you added more hours in the day or will we just fill those up too?
Yes, so that's part of the challenge. There is not enough hours in the day to get done what you are trying to get done, because what you are trying to get done is not humanly possible. I'm not just saying that to Dawn, I'm saying that to everybody. Like the most important thing we can do in that moment is to rewire our thought patterns and take care of ourselves to boost our own capacity so that the brain goes, oh, wait, we do have time. So here's a perfect example. At night, we're like, man, I'm feeling really exhausted. I know if I go for a walk in the morning, I'll feel better. So tomorrow I'll go for a walk in the morning. And the alarm goes off and your thought is, I just don't have time to get it done. Well, the thought triggers a reaction in the body that says, if we don't even have time to go for a walk, we're in dire need of survival. And the whole chemical cascade, the whole way the brain works is radically different. Now, what if all you did was say, you wake up and your brain still going to say you don't have enough time to go for a walk, but you say, you know what? I know I don't have as much time as I'd like to have, but I can go for a walk. And if I go for a walk, I'll actually get more done in less time because I'll have better energy. There's a story that we have to change around how we think about these things. It doesn't get rid of the thought. The thought's going to be there. So don't beat yourself up about the thought. Here's where I love my little monkey mind. And I know you've got your monkey, but when I have those thoughts, I go, oh, hey, there's my monkey mind trying to protect me so that I can sleep longer so I don't burn too many calories. It's the same monkey mind that wants me to eat the extra pizza or drink the extra beer so that I can store more calories. But if I can acknowledge that, especially with some humor and some levity and say, okay, hey, thanks, monkey. I appreciate that, but we're going to go for a walk anyway. And then let's see how that works out. Just do it for 7 days and see if it makes a difference. And you're going to find yourself having more capacity to deal with the challenges of your day. So we are not going to get more time, but we can have better energy to bring to the time that we have.
All right, I'm thinking about my friends Debbie and Perrin and all of us who are just so overloaded, like how to rethink of that. So what you're just saying is we have to think we have to just reprioritize in a sense.
Let me give you a really practical, let me give you a super practical. Let's
Practical.
drill it all the way down to this. I have a Post-it note that I put on my computer in the morning when I'm struggling with this. And the Post-it note says, you will not get it all done today. Deal with it. And so to me, it makes me laugh, right? Because I think I can get all this done. And if I were to tell you how many things I'm working on right now, people are like, do you sleep? I do. And I work out and I eat healthy food. It's not so much about having a lot to do. It's making sure those things are aligned and making sure we have the energy and that we're taking breaks so that we can do them better. And I schedule 25-minute meetings. Usually we don't need an hour. If both people get to the point and we show up on time and we end on time, if we need another call, we'll schedule another call. But that's where it gets to be, there's so many more practical things like this I'll share when we do the workshop of like, how do you organize your time? How do you set healthy boundaries? The story you tell yourself, how do you nudge your brain in a more positive direction with things like a meditating turtle next to your computer so that when Zoom is taking a long time and swirling, I just put my hand on the turtle's head and I'm like, you know what, it's going to be okay. Like little things that you can do to prime positive in your brain that may not seem like they're making a big difference, but you do enough of those things over the course of the day and you feel different. Your energy is different.
Right.
I love this from someone. You see that from Elizabeth? Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you read it? I think it's so fantastic.
So Elizabeth shares, I love this. I have a sign over my desk that says, I didn't get everything done in a day either. God, that's perfect.
I love that. I also think about Dr. Wendy Balabi, another great woman in our community,
Yeah.
who always says she does squats while she brushes her teeth. And to me, like, you know what I mean? It's a physical activity. Every day I wake up and say, I have to do something that's going to help build my muscles.
Yeah.
And, I could just kind of stand there or I can do squats. It always makes me think about actually amplifying the time that we have without making all of us too crazy.
Well, and I think an issue for a lot of us, and Dawn, I'd be curious if you have this, is that as a former athlete, it feels like if I don't run 6 miles, it's not good enough. If I don't walk for 2 hours down to the pier and back, it's not good enough. It's like, and I have to deal with this with my clients all the time. So many of them are former athletes, many of them former professional athletes. And it's like, think of how much time you were putting into your day to do that. That's not you anymore. Professional athlete trains about 90% of the time to perform about 10% of the time. And most of us don't train anytime. We're performing all the time. And so it's this idea that I was so grateful to learn from my colleagues at the Human Performance Institute of being a corporate athlete or being a life athlete or being a parent athlete or whatever you are. What are you doing to take care of your body, mind, and spirit in a way that when it's game time, it matters? And you're not going to have great energy all the time. There's no way. It has to oscillate. And there's like my favorite word in the whole world is oscillation, because the human system is designed to do that.
Let me write that down. I did not know that was your favorite word, but now I do.
I have other words that are probably more favorite, but I really like oscillation. And I use this with people all the time because it's like if we were in a conversation and I love talking to you and we hit about the 45-minute mark, I'd need to oscillate. So I'd stand up or I'd move around. I mean, you can point and flex your feet. You can use some essential oils. There's all sorts of stuff you can do. But the human system is not designed to flatline. A flatline always means something toxic or dangerous. And if you think about how we live our life, we get up and we go and go and go and go and go. And then we're surprised that we can't fall asleep at night. Like we're not meant to move at a static pace. We're meant to change and adapt. And that's, my new book, The Adaptability Quotient, is all about that the right amount of stress, the right amount of stimulation with recharge and recovery and repair and all of that is where growth happens. There is no growth without some sort of breakdown or breaking apart first. And that's the real opportunity I see in what we're all dealing with COVID-19 is everything has broken down to some extent. And it's time to build it back up. But we have to be realistic and patient with ourselves that we're tired. So we can't just go straight in and start building without repairing, recharging.
No, but and you're right. And we're going to go to, we have a great positive and adaptability. I don't want to go to that just yet, Sherry.
Yeah.
I thought this was incredibly important. There's not a lot of growth without breaking down. And I have to tell, for anybody who's read Untamed, she talks also a lot about the fact that it's the pain part.
Yeah.
And so we are experiencing a lot of pain and we're experiencing a lot of breaking down, which means we're on the cusp of tremendous growth.
Yeah.
If we will allow ourselves, right, to take a little time, take a little step back and say, we will be okay.
Yeah.
But what is the growth going to look like? What is the growth we can experience? If we're open to that, right, then this is an incredible time we're living in. It is anyway, as we know.
And I encourage people to, again, be realistic, use self compassion for yourself. Don't think like, because this is what I did going through this last year, especially as a so called expert and struggling as much as I did. That's what really got me to the point of needing, for my own safety, to have people around me so I wouldn't hurt myself, was because I was so ashamed that I couldn't get myself out of this. And I have struggled with depression in times where, it's a couple weeks, but never for 9 or 10 months. And there's things I'll continue to share with this community about what got me through. And I've got a blog about, there was like 25 different things. One was actually a letter from my niece, which was the thing that I believe saved my life. And something I like to share, especially with people who struggle with depression, because we need to have hope. And so a lot of times we encourage people to have a hope box where there's pictures of people that you love, or letters, or things that remind you about, things that really matter to you. Because in that moment, it's not the logical part of your brain. It's the sensory overstimulated part that just can't stand being in your own skin anymore. So I say all of this to say that if we're not careful, then it's like, okay, we have to grow now. And so we stress ourselves out about having this tremendous growth. And we can only do that at the right pace and by starting to set some of these healthy boundaries. So I know for me, I've been working my tail off on some really great new initiatives I'm excited about. But as of tomorrow, I'm taking 5 days pretty much unplugged to spend with some friends and go play golf and be at the beach and do things I haven't done in a really long time. And I will do that. So we have to prioritize it, though. I have to say that doing that, like playing golf, to me is just as important as any client meeting I'm going to have. And by the way, my phone is going to be on airplane mode because I still like to take pictures, but I'm going to know nothing is being received and I'm fully present in the moment. That's why I think golf is so good for our brains as well.
Of course, you're talking to a full believer there. And of course, our friend Susie Whaley would love to hear that. My husband, all of that is really good.
Yes.
Let's look at some of your positive adaptability guidance, which we put together for us.
Yes.
We start with the importance of your story.
Yeah. So I think I've been weaving these in, throughout what we've been talking about so far. And that first one is the biggest issue that gets in the way between what we know and what we actually do is our story. It's what we tell ourselves about what we do. And if you want to say it in a fun and playful way, it's the big but that gets in the way, because we say, I want to work out, but, or I want to eat healthy, but, or I want to meditate, but, and we have to pull that out. So I always ask people, literally write that down. Write down, I want to blank, put your big butt word, and then put what's the thing? What's the thing that's coming up? Not enough time, not enough money, my kids need me, what? And then if it's really important to you to get this thing done, then you have to have a new story. So I've shared with everyone on the stage before that, I've gone through, I was hospitalized in and out for 2 weeks with panic attacks, not knowing what was going on many years ago. It's probably been 15 years now. And after that happened, I started getting massage every week. And there's some weeks I miss, and then there's some weeks where I'll do 90 minutes or even 2 hours to make up for it. But it was hard to say that, because even as I say it now, I always feel like people are going to judge me and say, oh, it must be nice to be the speaker or lady who travels and goes to spas. But the reality is there's a lot of times I can't afford it or I don't want to do it. But my story became the only way I can be extraordinary for my clients is to take care of myself. And for me, getting massage is the best way I can do that. So if it's important to you, change your story. If it's not, let it go and find something else, because there's always something you can do. Maybe working out's not the thing for you right now. Maybe it's eating a little better, or drinking a little bit less wine at night, or something like that.
So it would be great if anybody on the chat wants to say share some of your stories. I want to do this button, and then we can
Yes.
We can
I
react to
would
that.
love
How
that.
about that?
Let's get those big butts out of the way and then start training them.
I was born with a big butt. I don't know.
I was going to say big butts are good. I can think of several people who I don't have much of a butt, so I got to work on mine. But
all right.
that's another topic.
And then what about priming positive?
So priming positive, I mentioned as well, and that's those little nudges. I call them neural nudges. They're things that tell our brain that we do have enough and that we are enough. And one of the studies I really like by my friend Sean Acor and his wife Michelle Geelan, they looked at people who watched just 3 minutes of negative news in the morning, and they found that they were 27% more likely to rate their day as negative. So you prime your brain to negative, you have a more negative outlook on your day. You prime your brain to positive, you have a more positive outlook. And so we've seen this as well with writing down 3 things you're grateful for, which improves optimism, happiness, performance, all sorts of things, as well as humor. So we did a similar study looking at listing something funny that happened to you over the course of the day and doing that for a period of time. And I can't remember if it was just 7 days or if it was a full 30 days, but people did this challenge and they had those same benefits up to 6 months later. So priming your brain, especially first thing in the morning before you do any work or think about your to-do list, I always say, think about who you want to be before you think about what you have to do. So prime positive, I want to be connected, I want to be grounded, I want to be loving, I want to be whatever. And then what does that mean? What does it feel like? And you can use the recharge guided meditations that I have, that I share with everybody for free to help do that. And then before bed, this is really when your brain needs to be primed again for positive so that you sleep more effectively, that you are able to consolidate memory and learning and things at night. Do not watch stressful, intense, dramatic TV right before you go to bed. Watch it during the day. I'm not saying you can't watch those shows, but don't watch it right before you go to bed. Watch some humor.
I don't know if this happens to anybody else. And by the way, Charlene says, I want to be more physically active, but I have so much time needed for caregiving.
Oh, get me started on that topic because caregiving
That's a challenge.
caregiving is one of the most important things that we can do, and it is also by far the most stressful. And so if you are a caregiver, number one, you need this more than anybody because the demand on your energy is higher, and therefore your capacity has to match or at least help you get through a challenging season if it's temporary. The other thing is those we care for pick up our energy. So it's even more important that we can bring the best energy that we have access to. And again, not to feel guilty about that, but getting some help for some short breaks or doing these little things, again, you can do while you're there: essential oils, music, color, nature, all those types of things.
Right. So hi, everybody. Welcome to Refresh. We're here with our good friend and the best neuroscientist we know, Dr. Heidi Hanna, who's helping us today to find good stress in life. Heidi, when you talked about priming positive, I have to tell you, I don't know if this happens for anyone else, is okay, I'm in bed and I'm snuggly and my sheets are comfortable. And the second I close my eyes, it's not like every bad thing happens, but it's that comes into my brain. But there is this rush
Yeah,
of things to do, things
of
I
course.
missed. And it's almost like I have to open my eyes and start again.
Yeah.
And I haven't figured out how to not make that happen.
So let me give you the reason why it happens, and then let me give you what I think is the best solution. The reason that that happens is because if you think about that oscillation pattern again, and the system's designed to do this up and down, but we don't do that well. So we get up and we go and go and go and go and go. The only way we can sustain that energy, and you have amazing energy. So a lot of yours is naturally, you're naturally gifted to have a lot of energy. However, you're still kicking out some stress hormones to keep the level up that high because we just need that to pay attention. Anything longer than about 90 minutes with low stress or longer than 60 minutes with a higher level of stress. We have to have stress hormones to help us. So what happens then is we end up going to sleep and we're physically tired, but we're mentally wired. So we're tired and wired at the same time. So as we start to rest and get into that sleep state, the cortisol and other stress hormones actually brings us back to attention again to alert us, and essentially convinces us that if we just do one more thing now, there will be less to worry about tomorrow. And it turns out it's a lie. There's always plenty to worry about tomorrow, even if you get one more thing done. This is where, to me, the monkey mind comes back and says, yep, I hear you. I know you're trying to protect me. I probably could have taken a few more breaks today and you wouldn't be screaming at me so loud. So I acknowledge you. And now I'm going to focus on something else. And it's that, okay, now what? My go-to is guided meditation, and there's a few of them I listen to where literally I hear this man's voice on YouTube. He's my favorite. I haven't connected with him in person yet, but I will. And I just hear his voice and I'm like, my whole body starts to melt. Now, with that, I also use essential oils. So I have them diffusing, and there's some oils that are more helpful for sleep. I also take, if I'm really wound up, a supplement that has, and I'll share it with you, Donna. I don't advocate for anything specific in particular, but there's different things for different brain chemistries that work. This one has, I think, L-theanine, which is an amino acid, but just kind of helps calm us into sleep. And then also having a cool temperature. I mean, there's so many sleep strategies that you can do to just help your nervous system relax. But the biggest thing is that mental chatter and just knowing, okay, this is my survival mechanism, trying to keep me on high alert. There's nothing to be afraid of. And if you need to, keep a notepad next to your desk. Do not turn on email. Do not turn on technology. Do not turn on your phone and type a quick note. It should be paper and a pen. And if you can, even in the dark, chicken scratch it and know that it's there for tomorrow and let it go.
I do the paper and pen thing, and it's funny how many people can relate to this. You did speak on the stage about dealing with stress together. We're
Yes,
gonna roll that in right now. How about that?
I'd love to.
Okay.
So, I have decided to walk this path and do things that terrify me because I know that there are other people out there who have things happening to them and they feel like I have all of this information. Why am I still getting hijacked by my own brain or my own body? It's so confusing. And when we share those experiences and we hear other people saying, I've had that experience as well, there's nothing more powerful or bonding than to know we're going through something difficult together. In fact, I'll share with you that one of the coolest nuggets in research I feel like that we've learned recently is that when we experience something challenging with other people, it actually helps our brain to get stronger. So the chemical cortisol, which typically builds or breaks down our brain and makes our brain atrophy, when we have cortisol plus oxytocin, it makes our brain stronger.
Okay, so we're stronger together. Can we take that away from it? Like,
Yes, for sure. And I'm just so grateful to the people that I've had the opportunity to work with. This was shared to me by a dear friend, Dr. Bruce McEwen, who is definitely the best neuroscientist ever to walk the planet. Unfortunately, he passed away last January. It was a very unexpected and hard loss for me. And in fact, I'm doing a lot of fundraising efforts now with a group called Hope for Depression Research Foundation in his name and in his honor. So he had shared that study with me, and I was so excited to share that, especially because we're in a group of women and we have our men who we love who come and support us in that. But the female brain pattern actually has more oxytocin and more estrogen naturally. So our stress reaction tends to be more hardwired for not fight or flight, but tend and befriend. And it's because of the oxytocin and the estrogen, plus a little bit of cortisol and the timing of how all of that works, that helps us to reach out to other people, want to be part of community, want to have dialogue, want to get better together. And it's one of the great gifts, I think, of the female brain. The challenge is so much of the research and the support and the education is all about, well, you have to go to the gym and you have to work out and it's all this fight or flight stuff. You have to problem solve or you have to go to the gym. Well, or you could connect with a friend or watch a funny movie or go for a walk or get a massage or do something nourishing. So I think it's why we need to know, first of all, that our stress signature is unique. We all have a different way of dealing with stress and reacting to it, but that also, no matter who we are, we benefit by being together because that's the fastest and most intense way to tell your brain you have more capacity. Because guess what? We don't have enough by ourselves. None of us has enough by ourselves to deal with the world we live in, especially today, but at any point. We're not meant to be in isolation. We're meant to be together. So when we're together and we just know we're together, instantly we double, triple, quadruple our perceived capacity to cope.
see, I always thought that the idea of Generation W, because people always say like, oh, we want to be in smaller groups, and we do. I just always feel that power when everyone comes together so openly as they do. It's extraordinary. And that's why people leave always so lifted. We're challenged by this technology, but we can make this technology work because it's the best that we have right now to bring us together. And that's why we have our refreshes. So thank you, everybody. And make sure we can continue to do this because we not only do this for ourselves, but we do this for each other. It's really, really powerful. The last thing you said in your positive adaptability list, Heidi, was being contagious.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
I love that. Tell us about what that is all about.
I love that. It was interesting. This came to me while I was dealing with COVID. I was one of the first people to get sick. I was in Seattle working with Boeing at the end of February. And we're actually not sure when I got sick. There's a chance I actually got it in November in Florida. It's really interesting, but I was working with some colleagues down there. One of my colleagues actually got very sick and is still dealing with neurological challenges. He's having some temporary
Oh, really?
paralysis and
COVID. Mhm.
from COVID, long haul symptoms. And it's so bizarre because we're working on a research project looking at the neurological impact of COVID. And so here she is. And then I have this totally different reaction with this extreme depression and anxiety for 9 to 10 months. So it's just really interesting to see how that happens. It doesn't happen the same with everyone, but this idea came to me because all of a sudden we were so contagious, right? And so I'm traveling back. I was still traveling and working and not understanding what was going on and trying to be there for my clients. And this putting on masks and how contagious we are, and just thinking like, well, stress is contagious. I wrote a book called Stressaholic that was all about that stress is addictive and contagious. And if I feel stressed, there's literally things that will happen in my voice tone, in my breathing patterns, in the pace of my speech that will trigger you to feel like there's an emergency too. So I feel like we're running out of time and I start talking really fast and then you start talking really fast and none of us are breathing, right? So all of a sudden it hit me, what if we really thought about the fact that our energy is contagious in a positive way? So being positively contagious. And this speaks as well to the caregivers, the teachers, the first responders, all of the people out there who keep telling me they don't have time to take care of themselves, but taking care of others is taking care of ourselves. Being self-care is not selfish. And I think that's especially for women a really difficult one to convince ourselves of. Putting our oxygen mask on first, all of that. We know it, we say it on stage a lot, but do we really live our lives in that way? And that's my call to people right now is, can you actually show up that way? I'll tell you, I cannot show up that way hour after hour after hour. I can't, but I can give you the very best energy I have for a period of time and be much more impactful than I would if I tried to be all things to all people.
I think that's important. I've two quick questions for you before we have to go, which I don't want to have happen.
I know.
But I love this question. It says, during key times in a day, when you have a big meeting, you have a performance, let's say, you're playing in a big athletic event, what are some of the mental and or physical primers or reassurances that you can use to help make your brain activate that positive energy? Great question.
Yeah, great question. And I like to think about this as two things. So I think about these techniques, recharge strategies, as being proactive and reactive. So the best thing you can do, just like training your body, is to train your mind proactively for those situations. So you don't want to wait until you're in a situation and you need to have the capacity. It's like, okay, Tom Brady doesn't wait until he needs to throw a football, for lack of, I mean, there's a million people I could say, right? A golfer doesn't wait until they have a long putt or a chip shot to practice that. They practice, 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 so that when they're in the moment and something happens, they're able to react and then respond in a different way. So when the technology doesn't work now, I just kind of expect it. I've practiced already. And then I have little cues in my environment, like my stress monkeys and things, to remind me. So proactively, I do my breathing exercises. I do my workouts, which for me are better than any medication. I have to work out. I have to get outside. I spend time at the beach. All those things are proactively giving me more capacity. And then reactively, which is usually what people want to know, is, well, what do I do in the moment when something's going wrong? Well, if you've proactively trained using these things, then you can use these cues to remind you. So if something's going, every media event, everything I do, I always have my stress monkey with me, so that when something happens, like being on stage at Generation W and the microphone's not working or something, it's like, hey, I'm a stress expert. Of course it's going to go wrong. Other things we can do is getting really connected with what matters most to us. And it goes back to that idea of, how do I want to show up? So if I'm talking to my mom, and my mom knows this, I sometimes get activated by my mom because I want to help her and fix her and make all of her problems go away, and I can't. Is that in that moment, I feel that, and I just remind myself, the best thing I can do right now is just be present and listen. She actually doesn't want me to fix
Right,
it.
right, right, right. Are there
But
any,
that doesn't happen without training. So that's my point. You got to train it in order to show up like that.
and training, usually you get a training partner, right? You
Absolutely.
always have
Oh
a training
gosh.
partner, which is really a good thing to remember.
Yeah. And at the workshop, we'll talk about these things. At the workshop, we'll talk about these things, and I'll actually give you guys a 7-day challenge and a 21-day challenge of an opportunity to connect with an accountability partner. So you'll actually have a kind of brain boss program that you could go on to really implement these things.
Well, that's really cool. Sean wants to know, are there any foods that specifically reduce stress? Chocolate,
Yes.
for me, it's chocolate, of course.
Yeah, there are, and there's always better options, so it's like with chocolate, dark chocolate's best. And if you don't like dark chocolate, then don't force yourself, because that's silly. Have things that you really enjoy in moderation. I mean, I'll be honest, I really like champagne. And I was always like, well, I should drink red wine because it's healthier. The reality is, all alcohol is toxic to the brain. So you don't want to have too much. But if you have it in moderation and you drink lots of water and you have some good salmon and other things, it's like there's things that structurally are good for the brain, like salmon and omega-3 fatty acids, and your fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins. It's like common sense stuff. But there's stuff that's emotionally good for you too. And if we allow ourselves to have those things, for most people, if you don't have an allergy, you're not going to have an adverse effect. I usually suggest people doing at least 80% of your food intake from things that are really healthy and helpful. And then 20% can literally be whatever you want that you enjoy, because you're getting what you need from the other 80%.
Right. So here's a question we are now going to make sure we ask everyone, and I'm not sure if we've asked this to you. If you had to give advice to your younger self, what would it be, Heidi?
So this is hysterical, because I was on a really wonderful call yesterday with the Global Wellness Institute, colleague of mine. Another story I'll have to tell you at another time, but and they asked us to come up with questions to ask each other. And that was the question I asked the group. It's my favorite question. So no, you haven't asked me, but I love that question.
Okay.
And in this moment, what comes up to me is, it's going to be worth it. And I know that's not really advice, but it's like all the things that I went through, and wanting it to mean something, and wanting it to matter, and wanting it to make sense at some point. For the first time in my life, it does. And I'm healthier and happier than I've ever been. And it would be nice to have known it was going to work out in those moments where I really thought the best was over. And that's the point I got to last year, was like, I've had an amazing life. If this is my life, what I've done up until the age of 46, I think it is, I'm not counting anymore. I've had an awesome life, and it's good enough, and I'm enough. And I knew that, but what I didn't realize was it was going to get even better. So it would have been nice to know that.
Yeah, but you know what? Now you do, and it's never too late either,
That's
right?
right.
Never too
That's
late
right.
to learn.
I just remind myself every day, because I'm still that younger inner, child every day. I live as that person. That's the best version of me.
Well, every version of you we love. I have to just say, I took all these notes, Heidi, as you were talking, which is easy to do. So I'm going to remind some of the things that I chose. If anyone has anything else they'd like us to remember, I see Perrin Rubin writes, and is very grateful, that self-care is not selfish. I think that's so important. And for me, that also ties directly into this incredibly powerful image of the human system is not meant to flatline.
Yeah.
Which means we shouldn't be sitting at our desk all day doing the same thing, which ties into, again, self-care is not selfish, that I need to jump up and I need to move around. And when I do, which I try to do, I don't want to feel guilty about it. And I like that for our entire team to kind of feel like that. I think we might have to do whistleblowing and calisthenics in the office. That might be fun. I also really take a lot from this idea that there's not a lot of growth that doesn't come without breaking down.
Yeah.
And that, so growth doesn't, listen, we want to be positive and we want to have positive adaptability, but breakdowns can be painful and they can be difficult and they can be challenging, but sometimes it's what we need or have to do in order to get to this other side of growth. And I think that's really powerful. I think for me, that's an optimism as I look through this time and my friends are like, I'm over this, I'm over this. I'm like, yeah, but we'll get through and we'll
Yeah.
be better and we'll make it. We can do this.
Yeah.
And then of course, the last thing that I started was the benefit that we get by being together, how it increases our capacity.
Yeah.
So I want to thank every single person, starting with you, Heidi, for coming together today to increase each of our capacities exponentially. I think I have to add that to our refresh every single week, right? That to me is incredible power. And I just want to say thank you for that.
I just want to add too that while I was struggling, it's kind of ironic to think back that we did the first one of these together and we talked about humor, which is one of my favorite things. But I listened, so I was able to participate in many of them. And I know I was here in chat a lot of times and on a run or on my elliptical machine. It was so filling to my soul to be served by this community. So yes, I do what I can to fly out there and be on stage, but I've received so much from this group. It's the event I look forward to the most every year. And I'm so excited to come back for the third time.
On the 16th, you won't have to fly, but here's some other things. Joy loved the fact that your champagne and dark chocolate were your things that were going to help us the most. And Rachel loved that as well. And Shar talked about the 80-20 ratio of eating healthy and eating what makes you happy, right? Thanks, Joy. It's always great for you. I want to remind everybody, if you haven't seen it yet, I'd love for you to share it. Actually, we should start posting this as well, that Generation W, our 10th anniversary, will be once again virtual with some incredible speakers. We'll really be talking about what it's like to be intentional. We like to say that in 2020, we can see what needed to be changed. And in 2021, we're going to be intentional about creating change. And I think that relates a lot to what Heidi just shared with us. Go to our website, genwnow.com, to register. Our next session, which will be in 2 weeks, will be Jay Newton Small. I don't know how many of you know Jay Newton Small. She is extraordinary. She was also with us, I think maybe season 4. It's so funny. I do feel like Netflix is guiding my life. Season 4, I think she was with us. She's a nationally acclaimed author of Broad Influence, a book actually that had tremendous influence on us as it got us to actually do a study on the impact of girls and women's leadership in a market. I do believe politics and leadership and change does begin locally. She's also the co-founder and CEO of the Memory Well. If my mom's still on this, it's something everyone who has older family members should know about. It's really helping you preserve the memories and lives and stories of our families. It's also really interesting work. Again, I want to thank Sherry, our producer. Way to go, Sherry, and our team today. Charlene, amazing. Ruth, Mariah, and Kasha. And we'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Same bat time, same bat channel. Heidi, thank you so very much. Everyone have a great day.